This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm good, but I have a mea culpa today. You know what that is?
Yes, I do.
So,
you're going to give me an excuse about something.
It's a confession or an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. I'm going to date this back to episode 175, where Andrew Shikiar was on our podcast. And for our lighter note question, we said, what was your favorite band from Seattle? Or I don't remember the exact question. And Andrew said something like, Heart is my least favorite, right? Like, I hate Heart. And I kind of like joked around like, yeah. Like, but I was lying, man. I love Heart. I don't know why I went along with it, but for the past year, I felt horrible about doing that. And so today I'm coming clean. I like Heart.
Okay. Well, the good news is Andrew's going to be on the show today, and we'll introduce him in a minute. So you can give that heartfelt apology. Andrew is staring at you with wide-eyed wonderment. First, he thought he was going to say something like, you loved him, or that he loved it, and he was prepared to jump in, man. He was like not going to wait. But we'll get to Andrew in a second. I don't really know Heart. I think I know the song Barracuda. That's Heart. Hey.
Oh, Crazy on You. No, I'm not actually a big Barracuda fan. Crazy on You and Alone. Those are awesome songs, man.
Okay. Well, I don't celebrate their entire catalog, so I think they have a couple hits, and that's about all I know. I'm not a Heart fan beyond that. Should we get to our conference plugs? Because we have a lot of conference plugs coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
I think it's the most ever. We have I have a very packed speaking schedule all of a sudden in the space of like 3 weeks for the next couple of months. So the first one coming up is the Cybersecurity Midwest Summit. This one is in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's September 14th. It's put on by ComSpark and CDO. I'm going to be part of a panel there talking about identity and access management. I have no idea what yet. We still haven't figured that part out yet. Just got synced up with my fellow panelists. I don't know. What is it? It's the existential question. What are we doing? Why do we even care? Like all that stuff. So I'm sure we'll come up with something. I'll have a link in our show notes. So if you're in the Cincinnati area, September 14th, come check me out and, be part of the panel, or at least come watch the panel and have an identity conversation with us. The next one that I have been talking about for a couple of weeks now is Identity Week America. I've been teasing a discount code, and we finally have it all set up and ready to go. Identity Week America, that's October 3rd and 4th. That's in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be hosting a panel on passkeys. My good friend Andrew has agreed to be part of that panel, or maybe him or his designee. We'll see whatever ends up happening. But I thought, well, how do we have a conversation about passkeys without bringing FIDO into this? So we've got that. A code for that is IDAC 30, 30% off of your conference pass, which is a nice little discount. So if you're looking to attend Identity Week America, October 3rd and 4th in Washington, D.C., I'll have a link in our show notes as well with the code and a link to register, all that good stuff. Come check out the panel that I'll be moderating. We'll be talking about passkeys with Andrew and a couple other folks. And then, of course, we have to talk about the Authenticate conference. That's why we're here today. We have a code for that one as well. Thank you to Andrew and Megan and Adrian and others that have been helping us out with this. IDAC 15 podcasts. That is October 16th to the 18th in Carlsbad, California, just north of San Diego. I know Carlsbad very well. I have family on my wife's side who lives there. So we'll see if maybe I'm too busy and I'm not able to do things. The busy life of a speaker at conferences and things like that. But Jim, you and I are actually going to be at Authenticate. I should mention the other two. It's going to be just me, Identity Week America and Cybersecurity Midwest Summit. Those are just solo ventures for myself. We're kind of dividing and conquering. And then you and I will be doing some things at Authenticate conference, and should be a fun time.
I just have to figure out if I'm going to bring my golf clubs or rent them there. I mean, that's the big question for me right now.
Well, I'm a one bag person. I try to one bag travel as much as I can. So I'm definitely not bringing clubs. If I need to, I will rent them. I am terrible at golf. So don't expect any great Don't have great expectations of my golf game, is I guess way I'm putting it.
I'd like to play against you then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't, there's no way that I would win. So here's a fun little tidbit about me.
You've never seen me golf before.
This is true. Well, I'm just guessing. I can hit an iron. I cannot hit a wood to save my life. I took lessons when I was in high school, and I stopped going after the irons. So I never really got the swing down for an iron. I can hit a 7-iron. Great. I'm looking forward to doing some Top Golf next week with my guy David. We're going to see him. But yeah, I can't hit a wood to save my life. So, like a par 3 course is probably, the only thing that I would have a chance at.
Yeah, I can talk golf all day, and I'm sure that's not why anybody tuned into the podcast. So
yeah, let's get a little bit more into the Authenticate conference. And again, I'll have links in our show notes to all this stuff. We are going to talk about Authenticate 2023 and making his triumphant 6th appearance on the show, now tied for the lead with the artist formerly known as Julie Smith of the IDSA. He'll have a chance to pull ahead next time. Episodes 56, 111, 118, 141, 175, and then this will be episode 225. Welcome back, Andrew.
Jeff, Jim, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for sitting through that and biting your tongue when Jim started talking about heart. This is an audio podcast, but I could see a little bit of steam coming off around, the feelings for heart. Do you want to, do you accept Jim's apology? Let's just get this out in the open right now. I mean, what are your feelings around heart? Are they still as strong as maybe you've indicated in the past?
I'm not a fan. I respect Jim's fanhood, and I'm sure the Wilson sisters appreciate your apology. I heard they were a little miffed by the whole thing, but we'll come back to music in a little bit. But no, I honesty is very important, and you can't sit on things like that because it builds resentment and bad feelings and just a sense of dishonesty. So, Jim, you're absolved of that, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you remembering our conversation. One thing I want to say, I want to congratulate both of you on your growth with this podcast. I mean, it's great to be here 6 times. That's really awesome. But, the way that this podcast has grown in stature is super impressive. You truly are an important voice for the industry. So thank you for what you're doing. And thanks again for having me.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. It has been a Cinderella story, I guess, to some degree. We don't do any advertising really. It's all word of mouth. And it's just Jim and I. That's the podcast. That's it. And, we thank people for listening. We thank for people for coming on the show, right, and stuff like that. But it's been a great ride. It's been interesting to see Authenticate grow over the years, and we're going to kind of get into that. I got to ask you, though, what is the secret to your success of multiple Identity at the Center appearances?
Bribes and kickbacks. That's what I guess we're not going to talk about publicly. I've been so fortunate to be part of FIDO Alliance. Sometimes I feel a little bit like Forrest Gump, being involved with this activity, being entrusted to serve as a leader and a spokesperson for the organization. The fact of the matter is what we're doing is so germane to everyone who listens to your show. People understand the challenge of passwords, the plague they present. I think that's one reason why FIDO Alliance has been so successful is that the industry at large understands the challenge at hand and understand that they need to work together to tackle that challenge, which we have done, because it is so important to the identity space and business in general. So I think that's why you've had me on 6 times, not because of my sparking personality.
Well, you do definitely have a sparking personality, but let's talk about authentication because that's really what you guys focus on and we've got plenty of shows that people can kind of go back in the back catalog and listen to, but give us just a quick refresher on FIDO and FIDO Alliance. And I think more importantly, what's the progress that's been made over the last year? Because it's been a big year. Passkeys are in the limelight now.
Yeah, that's certainly our headline from the past year. For those of you who don't know, FIDO Alliance is the industry body working on creating open standards and best practices for implementing simpler, stronger user authentication. You're basically aiming to reduce reliance on passwords, if not eliminate them entirely. We've been at this now for over 10 years as a body. We have hundreds of companies who take part in the Alliance, who build our technical standards, who run our programs, who build our best practice guidance, our white papers, our guidelines, and things like that. We've released several sets of specifications, most notably the core FIDO user authentication specs, or FIDO 2 specs, that have been built into just about every device and browser on the planet. So that's what we do, and that's who we are. Progress over the past year, I think, has been fantastic. Last year at Authenticate, passkeys was a key theme because we announced the passkey concept in May of last year. It's just over a year ago, I guess like 14 months ago now. We announced the concept of passkeys. The key new concept there was allowing the private key in the FIDO key pair to be securely synchronized over a cloud. So over an OS cloud or something like that. So iCloud, Google Cloud, things like that, such that the user's credentials will be readily available across all their devices. That was a new way of deploying FIDO. And we made that choice, a very conscious decision, to change the way FIDO could be implemented in order to accelerate consumer adoption at scale of FIDO authentication. Right? So we'd had a number of major brands already deploying FIDO in native apps and enterprise and with WebAuthn, for consumers, but we hadn't reached that tipping point yet. And part of the reason for that was that the way FIDO worked before, one needed to enroll every device for every service. So if I enrolled, ecommerceprovider.com on my iPad, they give me the chance to just use Face ID or Touch ID the next time, which is great. And I would never have to use a password on that device again. But then when I showed up on my MacBook or my iPhone or my PC, I would then need to enroll that device also, which basically means that every time I was enrolling a new device, I was essentially running through a account recovery process, which is counterintuitive to the user. And also, they really forced that service provider to keep the password front and center. And our mission is to deprecate the use of passwords, right? So it's almost counter productive to our overall goal. So that's why we allowed the private key to sync. And the other thing we've done with passkeys is we basically, passkey is a term that we've landed on for any passwordless FIDO authentication flow. So that could be a UAF native app. It could be a device-bound passkey on a security key. And we now have a consumer-ready term for a FIDO authentication flow, which is also very significant. All right, to try to take on passwords and ultimately replace passwords, you need to look at the advantages that passwords have. One of those is ubiquity, right? You can use a password just about anywhere. It's no fun to type in a password on a keyboardless phone or, God forbid, a smart TV, but you certainly can do that. And there's also a familiarity with passwords, right? They've been around for 60 years. Everyone knows how to use them. And so, we need to build the same ubiquity and same level of familiarity with FIDO. And passkeys gives us a chance to do that by having a single term and industry icon and common flows. Consumers will start, looking for the passkey icon, understanding what a passkey is when they're signing in on various sites. Whereas before, sites that supported WebAuthn, which again is using FIDO authentication, everyone talked about it slightly differently, right? And so by building this common terminology, common iconography, common user experiences, we're going to start really accelerating consumer awareness and demand for passwordless sign-ins.
I think the ubiquity piece is so huge. It's so important that it just, what to do. You don't have to read a help file or watch a video even to figure out how to use it. I think one of the other important things is, from a security standpoint, making sure that there's not an end around. It's you have to have the ability for people when they lose their passkey or can't recover, to be able to recover without having to type in a password, right? So that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of goes back to, part of the reason we did this is that your passkey will be readily available on your devices. So now with passkey, going back to my example, I enroll with, ecommerceprovider.com on my iPad. When I go to my MacBook, automatically it says, "Oh, Andrew, we see you have a passkey. Do you want to use your passkey?" And I just use, my screen unlock, probably Touch ID on my MacBook to sign in, right? So I don't need to enter a password to recover that device, which is really important. The other important thing to note, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit more later, is the security point, right? And I think about everything that we talk about in security. We've been talking about MFA, for years now. 2FA, how many factors do you need? The fact of the matter is, every factor we've added is really just trying to put a Band-Aid on the fundamentally flawed primary factor of passwords. And what we're doing with passkeys are truly a password replacement, where now your primary factor is an unphishable credential, which changes the way that everyone can and should look at user authentication for their consumers, for their employees, and for themselves.
It's been interesting to see the adoption from large organizations pick this up. I remember going through passkey setup for Google relatively recently, within the last few months, and I've been amazed at how well it works. Like it's like, this is great. Like, why aren't more people doing this? And we're starting to see those announcements, right? I'm definitely in the Apple ecosystem, so I've got the phone, the watch, the iPad, the Mac, and it just works. I'm looking forward to maybe cross-platform at some point. Not sure how that would work. I think we've seen some password wallets, for example, start to look at things. I'm sure they're all looking at it, but like 1Password and LastPass and Bitwarden and all that. And maybe they're the glue, right? That kind of crosses across different, ecosystems, for lack of a better word. But it's been a great adoption.
It has been. So you going back to what we've done the past year. So we announced passkeys in May, and then in October at Authenticate, we announced the first major commitments to deploy passkeys. All right, with PayPal and NTT Docomo. They came on stage with me at Authenticate during my keynote. And iOS and macOS was just launching support for passkeys around that time, right? And then Android went live, and Chrome OS went live with passkey support for sync passkeys, in December and January. So in reality, we've only had the two major device platforms, mobile device platforms, both supporting passkeys for a little over 7-8 months. So when you talk about some of the brands that have actually decided to support passkeys, is quite remarkable. So Hyatt, DocuSign, Shopify, TikTok announced last week.
Yeah, I saw TikTok was a big one.
And then Google. And actually what Google's done is so significant in the sense that anyone with a Google account can now enroll for passkeys, which, by the way, also work for social sign-in. All right, I was signing in to forget what account the other night. I had a Google sign-in before. I could use my Google passkey now to sign into other accounts as well. Apple ID. So an Apple ID now I can, secure with a passkey and back up with a security key. So it's truly actually quite remarkable progress in around 7-8 months to see how many big brands are using passkeys for consumer sign-ins.
It's got to be really encouraging to see that. I mean, we've been talking about sort of this passwordless thing forever and killing the password forever. And I feel like we are starting to get there. And you mentioned things like, or companies like Google and sort of that consumer facing, workflow and user experience. And I know that FIDO puts out guidelines around that. And I'm sure that's what they are, right? They're guidelines. Every brand is going to kind of figure out how they want to do it, but there has to be some consistency, I would imagine, right? To make it familiar enough where people can say, oh, okay, I'm kind of recognize this flow. How do the rollout of guidelines like that help the experience? How does it help inform some of the partners that you've mentioned, where they take that and say, yeah, okay, let's consider doing this in a similar way to drive adoption?
Yeah, that's a great question. If passkeys, were our headline, for the past 10 months, I'd say that our UX work is a subhead because it is that critical. And, I think people are tired of me talking about UX because I talk about, I think my throwaway line was like, every conversation I have around FIDO these days begins and ends with usability, but it is absolutely true. Because as people get more real about deploying FIDO at scale, you need to understand, how does this impact my consumer's user experience? Not only that, UX, will impact whether or not people actually enjoy their sign-in experience and choose to use it and choose to take part in your online experience. So the UX work we do is a very meaningful part of FIDO Alliance. We've released now 3 sets of UX guidelines, which are best practices for how companies should deploy FIDO authentication. These guidelines are based on very systematic research that we've done in partnership with the UX firm called Blink UX. And the research is scoped and driven by our UX working group, which is comprised of usability, design, and UI experts from our members. Right, we have 30-something companies taking part in this, and they're contributing usability experts. Right, just like our initial specs were written by the brightest minds on the planet in authentication identity, our UX work is being guided by the same ilk of people focused on usability and design. And what we learned, through this project was very eye-opening. All right, so we assumed that the passkey kind of sign-in flow to get someone to enroll for passkeys would follow the user journey we had for our WebAuthn guidelines, but it's actually not the case. right? Because I just one kind of teaser here, but generally to be using a passkey, you need to be using a password manager, right? You're using either iCloud or like your browser password manager, FormFill, which most people don't think of as password managers, but they actually are. And since you're already using one of those, getting someone to take action to enroll for a passkey is different because you can't really interrupt that flow, right? So we learned about that. The key takeaway there is to get someone to use passkeys, you need to engage them during an account-related activity, right? Meaning going to account settings or doing a password reset or things like that, which is not what we'd expected. And so our guidelines actually walk people through that. It's a very extensive set of guidelines. It's online. It's on our website. If you search FIDO UX guidelines, we've identified 130 something touch points of the user journey. We've given guidance on the top 6. Right, so we have more work to do, but we think that, or 6 or so, we think that these touch points that we cover, it really put companies in position to have a successful passkey implementation. And that's been validated by the fact that some of these early adopters who started down their passkey journey before engaging with us, once they saw the guidelines, to a company all said, holy blank, I wish I knew this beforehand. This could have saved me months of development time and tens of thousands of dollars of development time, because they all kind of run to the same ahas, right? And so we basically capture those ahas, roll them into these UX guidelines, and we're seeing companies use them to develop their own user flows. We also have some of the assets available online in Figma and elsewhere where companies can actually copy them and use them for their own implementations.
So, Andrew, you spoke at one of the keynotes at Identiverse, and I kind of, what an awesome conference that was. Yeah. I just kind of felt like the reception for FIDO Alliance and passkeys and everything you guys are doing was unanimously like, we love it. We want more. Send us more. I thought that was a great conference. The Authenticate 2023 conference is coming up. Identity Center is going to be the official podcast for it. I want to ask you, why should IAM practitioners attend the conference this year?
Well, first of all, you're going to be doing a podcast from the main stage. That's pretty good reason right there. Just come see you guys live. And I think we're talking about doing some other live podcast stuff with you as well. So, get to see Jeff and Jim in the flesh, which is always a treat. In addition, I think I agree with you. Identiverse is a fantastic show. Authenticate's a little bit more narrowly focused on authentication, right? Which is a critical part of anyone's identity implementation, anyone's identity stack. And so Authenticate's a place to learn about that first step in the user experience, the user journey. Our content's very case study driven. I think we have, 15, 20 different case studies this year across our dozens of sessions where people are talking about their experiences implementing FIDO or other means of passwordless authentication in a variety of settings, whether it's large scale consumer settings and financial services or enterprise settings or government settings. It's a chance to hear directly from other practitioners on what they've done to be successful or what they've learned along the way that any other IAM practitioner can learn from in a very actionable, meaningful manner.
Now, this year, the conference is moving from Seattle. I know you're a Seattle guy. You're moving it to Carlsbad, California, basically San Diego. Why the move?
We're going to reverse engineer the journey of Eddie Vedder, who started it in Chicago, went to San Diego, and then Seattle. So we might be in Chicago in a couple of years. We moved. We wanted to be in Seattle at first, not just because I'm a Seattle guy. It was a natural place for us to start. We have great stakeholders there in Microsoft and Amazon, and so many of our members have outposts there, where it gave us a good chance to have a lot of people who could attend. But we thought it was time to broaden things a little bit and bring it to a different part of the country. And what we found is a wonderful location in Carlsbad at the La Costa Resort and Spa. I think the location will really stand out. It's a little secluded. It's around 45 minutes from the airport, but we're working on some transport options. But B, once you get there, it's really a beautiful spot. It has kind of sprawling grounds where people can meet and network and take in, weather in what typically is a beautiful time of year in Southern California.
Yeah, I think you hit the key word there, weather. Good enough of an answer. You could have given me a one-word answer. I would have been cool with that. One of the things I always think is so important about conferences, but especially Authenticate, was the expo hall, or, the sponsors of the conference, folks who show up and I've got some solutions that help solve the problems of the IAM practitioner. How are you going to organize the expo hall, make sure that people have plenty of opportunity to get around and interact with folks?
Yeah, great question. I think one thing that makes the FIDO community unique is that the vendor community really does want to engage and help people. And Jim, you're talking about, I'm getting a little off topic. You're talking about how our message was well received at Identiverse, and it generally is well received because there's kind of a missionary sense in the broader FIDO community behind what we're doing. We're not a vendor trying to pitch something. No one's telling you that, yes, we want more passwords and we think phishable authentication is a good thing. Right? So everyone is willing us to move forward. That also carries into the vendor community of the FIDO Alliance and other FIDO certified companies, 35 to 40 of which will be exhibiting at Authenticate in Carlsbad. And they're always willing to talk to people, share best practices in addition to, giving demos and talking about their product and service set. The Expo Hall this year, so the location, again, it's really, it's a great venue. But I just was there yesterday doing a site visit, actually. I live in LA, so I could drive down there. We have one giant hall with all the content, another giant hall where the expo is going to be. We will have food and snacks and drinks inside the expo area with indoor-outdoor seating. We're going to run a challenge, kind of a scavenger hunt thing that should encourage people to go through the expo hall as well as to take part in other activities that they'll be encouraged to do. But ultimately, I think people will get a lot of value out of the expo hall in addition to meeting the vendors and having a nice place to congregate with other attendees and grab some snacks as well.
Yeah, great idea. The last thing I want to talk about was I did my registration. Of course, we have the discount code IDAC15 podcast, get 15% off. But it was asking me if I'm a member, and I was like, I don't know if I'm a member, but I think the answer is no. It was driving toward, do you want to register for the member plenary? And I don't even understand the word plenary, so I'm sure I could Google it. But what is the member plenary?
Yeah, so let's not forget FIDO Alliance is we're a nonprofit organization. Right? I talked about what we do and how we do it. Our specifications, our outputs are largely created by our members, our member organization. So any corporation, any company can join. We don't have individual memberships. But we have over 300 company members in FIDO Alliance. We meet 3 times a year, once in Asia, once in Europe, once in the Americas. What we've done is basically turn our US meeting into Authenticate as well. So typically what we used to do is have like a seminar the day before our plenary, and this had a lot of excitement, a lot of turnout. So we basically expanded that and turned that into Authenticate. So this year we're going to run the plenary actually adjacent to it. So we will have, depending on the day, 3 or 4 content tracks. Then we'll have a 5th track where these working groups can actually meet and advance their items. All right. So we have working groups, technical working groups, which cover things like, FIDO 2 specs, UAF, covers our IoT work. We have deployment working groups where people talk about, issuing best practice guidelines and papers. Like our enterprise deployment working group just issued an awesome set of papers about how to deploy passkeys in enterprise. All right. So those groups meet face to face. We have a board of directors that meets. So basically on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll have a single track where different working group meetings will take place one at a time. And then on Thursday, the day after everyone else takes off, everyone meets, right? So we'll have 4 tracks, the working groups all meeting, as well as the board of directors meeting throughout that day. So it's, that might be a little some insight into sausage making on how FIDO works, but that's what it is. So members have a different rate than non-members for Authenticate, but they're also signing up to attend these added sessions.
So it's interesting to hear that there's working groups taking place through the conference. I guess when I was thinking about it, it was something that would take place separate, but it is interesting to see that kind of pulled together. The themes for the conference this year, I mean, obviously could be based on authentication, but are there other things that we should be looking forward to from an organization standpoint, or maybe different tracks that things are being followed along?
Yeah, so it's real interesting to me. So this is our third year after this, and really the second year in earnest, right? So the first year we held a physical event was 2021, and they were coming off COVID. As there's another kind of like flare up of COVID, and so it was impacted by COVID. We maybe had 250 people, I think, in Seattle. And then 2022 is last year, is pretty much post COVID for most of the world, a lot more people. And this year, of course, is that's fully, knock on wood, in the rearview mirror, and we're going to have full attendance. But what's been interesting to see is how the sophistication and depth of the content has matured over the years, in parallel with FIDO becoming more mature. So in 2021, there's a lot of like, well, I piloted this, and here's what I'm thinking, and a lot of intro level type stuff. But now, there are multiple years of FIDO deployments under some companies' belts that they're bringing to share at Authenticate again. But sort of, we've always had case studies, but these will be more data driven, based on multiple implementations. So I think the themes are learn, get actionable content, and see how people are doing this. We have kind of different buckets. We're going to have 3 main tracks each day, with introductory content, some case studies, government block, payments block, other identity, adjacent identity topic block, some stuff on emerging technology. And then we have, this year, something new we're doing are actual workshops. So we're going to do a UX workshop, and we're going to do a developer workshop. These are both, there's also kind of content tracks on these topics as well, but the workshops will be true workshops where, classroom setting, 2-3 hours each, where people are interested in really gaining, hands-on knowledge and content will have an open laptop session where they're building things, right? This is the first time we've done that. So I'm super excited about that. So that's kind of a new thing we'll have here, in addition to kind of higher level developer and UX content on the main agenda.
I'm glad. So you touched a bunch of nerves for me in a good way. So the first thing, I'm glad to hear there's some introductory stuff, because I still feel like, I've been attending this conference now for a couple of years. And speaking of COVID, I'm not going to let Jim let this get away with this, but when the last time, or it was at 2021, Jim volunteered to speak. And I was like, all right, I'll go and I'll help you create the content, but I'm not speaking. And then what does he do? He goes and gets sick the morning of his flight to Seattle. I'm like, so I ended up having to do it myself. So thanks, Jim, for that. Appreciate that. Allie,
I will never hear the end of that. This is hey, now 2 years ago.
You left me hanging to dry, but I think it went well. The second one is this workshop concept. Tell me more about this. Do I bring my own laptop? Is it something that is it something you do on the web? It's like a virtual environment, I guess.
No, it's in person. So I should also mention that you can attend Authenticate virtually for all the tracks other than the workshop tracks. So the workshop tracks are on-site only. We're not streaming those remotely. No, it's meant to be like an interactive session where we have, so our UX working group, I talked about all those experts who are in that group, they're actually creating the curriculum for this multi-hour workshop. So when you register for Authenticate, you can choose the sessions you want to attend. You can always go back and change your registration later. As we get closer to the event itself, we'll send updates to those who pre-registered, with a set of expectations for what they should know going into it, what to bring with them, and some more details on the actual agenda for those workshop tracks.
That's really cool. I'm gonna have to go back and look at my registration and see if I can attend one of those. I'm not a developer. I'm not a UI person, but I certainly critique bad ones when I see them.
But I think that's true for so many people, right? So we have, like I was saying, we have I'll call it accessible UX and developer content also for the rest of us, right? So I love the UX stuff. I'm not a UX guy, right? I'm not going to do anything actionable with that. Likewise, I appreciate developer concepts, but I'm not going to be developing anything, right? So we have that content too. But Jeff, you hit on something else that's really important, which is that we are certainly including introductory content. And to be honest with you, that was one of our challenges. How do we structure these tracks? Do we do like 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, or is it like by subsets or topics? And so we opted more to focus on kind of buckets of content in these blocks. But certainly do have the intro content, a lot of it, of course, up front. So anyone who needs to get up to speed on what is FIDO, what are passkeys, what is UX, how do I consider the enterprise? We'll have all that content there for people to attend and make sure that those sessions don't conflict with other, kind of 100 level sessions on getting people all in the same foundation to talk about FIDO at Authenticate.
I think it's fantastic because that's the problem I always have is I see so many good sessions and they overlap. It's like, okay, well, do I pick one? Or it's like, I'm 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes somewhere else.
Like, I don't know how Andy does it for Identiverse, right? I feel like we have like 17 tracks at once. And without a doubt, because we have so much demand, so much great content, I'm always missing something I want to see. And that will happen here as well. I consider that to be a fantastic problem. And that's why we are actually recording everything, and everything's archived. It'll be available immediately to attendees. In fact, last year I heard some people doing this, right? They would go up to their room after the sessions and after the festivities, of course, and then immediately be able to access a track they were unable to see that day because they went to something else. So we have people covered in that event. But yeah, that's having conflicts is something we try to avoid, but it's certainly a good problem to have.
Well, as a regular Joe attendee person, I appreciate that. Yeah. Are there any specific keynotes or speakers that you're really kind of excited that kind of jumped off the page and it's like, hey, this is a good get, or I'm really looking forward to what so and so has to say?
Well, so Rachel Tovek's our featured keynote speaker. So I'm thrilled to have her. I mean, if you haven't seen Rachel speak, you're in for a treat. She's a social engineering guru who will talk about her different hijinks that she's done in the past and things to be aware of. I mean, social engineering is a very real, ongoing, and growing threat. Right? We talk about generative AI. Some of that hoopla kind of died down a little bit, but it probably shouldn't. Because you think about what AI stands to do in the realm of fraud, it's a very real threat, because of the social engineering attacks will grow in volume and most significantly in sophistication, where it becomes impossible to discern what's a real message from a fake one. So it's really important then for people to think about, well, if they're for some reason they're still on the sidelines and are still depending on passwords, generative AI should be the kick in the rear they need to get off the sideline and start adopting FIDO authentication to protect their employees. And it's not fair to ask your employees to be like a shadow IT team trying to sniff out phishing emails in the age of AI, let alone before. So I think that'll be a key talk. So she'll talk about social engineering. We have some AI themes. Ashish Jain from Arcos Labs, a good friend of FIDO Alliance, will dig into this in one of his presentations. We have several talks on that, so that'll be a key theme. Other keynotes we have, Amazon will keynote. We have some other major platform companies, providing keynote updates to be announced. So stay tuned on those. But I think we'll have a really good mix of main stage content. And then, like I said before, I always love the case studies. And one of the coolest things about running Authenticate is seeing the content come in. All right, so we had probably 2 or 3 times the amount of submissions as we had number of tracks, but the fact that people who are deploying FIDO are willing and interested to take the time to submit a speaking proposal and then actually come out and speak still blows me away. It's super cool. So I'm looking forward to new keynotes, new case studies this year from companies like Block, Pinterest, Starbucks, Fox, Shopify, DocuSign, all new. And then we have some updates too from companies like Target, who will reflect on how their FIDO implementations have progressed since they talked last about it in 2022.
Well, I believe in work hard, play hard, and by work hard I mean sit in an air-conditioned building and listen to people talk at keynotes. But one of the things that I remember from last Authenticate was the Mopop Museum and Social that you had in Seattle, and like the events that surround the conference are just awesome. And I wonder what you have in store for us this year, whatever you're willing to share at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think we want Authenticate to be fun. I'm not going to say irreverent, but we don't feel bound to any sort of trade show code of conduct. I mean, we expect people to conduct themselves well, but this doesn't need to be like another trade show. So one thing we're introducing this year, which is kind of fun for the main stage sessions, we'll have walk-up music. So everyone who's speaking will get a chance to choose their walk-up music for their session. So for example, you guys can choose Heart for your session. But it'll be fun to see what other people choose for their own walk-up music for each of their main stage talks. That'll be kind of like a fun little twist on things. I mentioned the scavenger hunt. I know it sounds like, oh, yay, another trade show gimmick, but we met with the team yesterday that's organizing it. It's going to be a lot of fun. for individuals or teams to take part in that, win great prizes, meaningfully great prizes. We are going to bring in food trucks for like the opening night reception. There's probably going to be In-N-Out food truck and other food trucks and plenty of to eat and drink to help people mingle. And again, I think the venue itself is really a special place, right? So the Monday night event, which is the opening reception, and the Tuesday night event, which will replace Mopop, both of those will take advantage of the natural surroundings where you can kind of mingle around, enjoy yourself, some food, cold beverage, and the company at Authenticate.
It is a lot of fun. We do have a good time there for sure. Hard is not my choice. I think we've been kind of thinking about how like our session might go, and I'm thinking is we'll just play our show intro and just do that. So at least there's some familiarity with it. Like the idea we've been playing around with is this idea of doing a live show in front of a live studio audience. And it just so happens this one may or may not be streamed at the same time and sort of that sort of thing. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know if we can do Heart because I don't want to get a DRM strike. I had a World of Hurt last week with one of our episodes and some music that I was trying to get working with. And it was a real problem for me.
Our production company assures me that they'll be on top of that, the DRM. So we'll see it goes on there. But the other thing to mention, when Jimmy mentioned golf, I don't know you're a golfer. We could probably spend 45 minutes boring everyone else talking about golf. But that being said, for those of you listening, it is on, the golf courses, there's 2 golf courses, one's under construction, other one's available. But within a wayward, 3 wood away, there's, 15, 20 golf courses in that area that are worth attending, worth going to and coming early. We're encouraging people to come early, bring your spouse, your family for the weekend prior. If you're a vendor, this is a great place to bring your customers, right? So bring your customers who are interested in learning about authentication identity, bring them early, wine them and dine them. There's a fantastic steakhouse on property. It's really meant to be, I'd encourage people to take advantage of the venue and the setting as much as they're looking forward to engaging with attendees as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I find it a very approachable conference too. Like I feel like, everyone's there, they're in an identity capacity, they're in a very specific identity capacity around authentication, right? And things like that. But I mean, I've had great experience. I've had great hallway conversations. Yeah. I learned about quantum computing one year from one of the attendees. I don't want to blow up a spot or anything like that, but it was interesting. It was like I've had a lot of good stuff. All right, I say it was Roger Grimes, but I mean, I was like, okay, this is good conversation, and that's the stuff that I think you can't replace virtually. I mean, I get people can't always be where they want to go live and stuff like that, but that's just one of my favorite parts is just those hallway conversations.
That's really one way I love to judge our success is seeing busy hallways. In this case, it'll be busy kind of like walkways. But I think that's the value of coming to these things in person, Jeff. I mean, you hit that spot on. The content's fantastic, right? And that's why we also have remote attendance options. If all you care about, if you care primarily about the content, or if for whatever reason can't travel, the content's available to you as a remote attendee. And we make it available, several months after the conference to the community at large. But it really is the networking, the face-to-face stuff that we aim to facilitate. We've expanded the timing of the breaks to give ample time for meetings, to go to the expo hall, to have impromptu conversations. So I think those are all things that we're aiming to facilitate.
It's almost like Hamilton, like, you were in the room when it took place. And that's about all I know of Hamilton, so don't quiz me past that. So I feel like this is a little bit of a celebratory year because we've got passkeys out. It's in the real world. People are starting to use it. We're done. Mission accomplished. What's next for FIDO? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more work to do, but I'm guessing the answer you're going to tell me is no, we're not done. There's a lot of things still that need to be taken care of. But what is next for FIDO and the FIDO Alliance?
Yeah, the mission is far from accomplished. We've seen a handful of very meaningful passkey deployments, which is fantastic, but more need to happen. And we're still learning, so we as a broader FIDO community, we speaking on behalf of the kind of core platform stakeholders that are implementing this, they're constantly learning. In fact, I give those companies so much credit in how quickly they've actually taken innovations and feedback into their OS implementations of passkeys based on what they saw from the UX working group, based on what they've heard from early adopters. There's a true desire to get this 100% right, and everyone's working very diligently to make that so. Another thing that actually I talked a little bit about at Identiverse, speaking of kind of passkey providers, is opening up the third-party passkey ecosystem. So you mentioned, 1Password and Dashlane and companies like that. They are independent credential providers who have a vital role to play in the future of passkeys. And so we're working on programs to make sure that those providers are vetted and can be recognized as such for having requisite security practices in place to protect passkeys and the fabric, the sync fabric that manages those. So that's something else that's really important to do. And then continue on, building out the technology. Technical work's not done. The foundation's there. There's work around the edges that always needs to be done. In credential flows and adjacent topics like wallets and identity and things like that we'll continue to focus on through our technical working groups and our deployment working groups that issue best practice guidance on how to successfully implement FIDO authentication. And then again, UX. The UX working group is a super exciting, dynamic group right now. They have a kind of roadmap ahead for them, focused on other touch points in the user journey where we want to test and deliver expert guidance on the best way to deploy passkeys. Ultimately, you only get so many cracks at consumers, and our focus is on making sure that people get it right the first time. Because if you tick a user off, they see passkey sign in and everything breaks down. The next time they see it, they'll be less likely to actually enroll for passkey. So it's very important to us that people get this right. So we'll continue to focus on guidance and making sure the technology itself is easy to implement, easy to use.
So we're going to end on a lighter note here in a minute, but I want to go back, and Jim started off this episode with a mea culpa. I have one of my own, because this actually happened at Authenticate a couple of years ago. I think it was the year that Jim ditched me and made me present on my own. No offense, just letting that in there. Somebody came up to me after that, after I was done presenting, and it was from a consumer password company wallet, like a LastPass or a Bitwarden or, things like that. I don't remember which one it was, but they asked me, what did I see the role of their company and similar with passwordless? And I didn't see it. I said, I don't know if there's really any role, because if we don't have passwords, how are we going, what do we need you for? Flash forward here 2 years later, and now I'm saying, oh, they're the glue that holds all the ecosystems together, at least right now. And I'm starting to see. I don't know if I'm right or not, but I know I feel like 2 years later, I was wrong 2 years ago, and I feel like I'm starting to catch up to maybe where that person was thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a natural assumption for one to make. When we first announced passkeys, I got all sorts of questions like, "Oh, wait, you're putting the password manager companies out of business, or you're putting your vendors out of business," and like people tend to fear innovation, and no one's going out of business due to passkeys, right? So if you think of passkeys and the role of password managers today, again, you're an Apple guy. Like iCloud is your iCloud keychain is a great password manager for you. I'm a multi, ecosystem guy because I like things difficult. So I use a password manager, across my devices, and then share with my family across their devices, and so that's where an independent credential manager like a Dashlane or Bitwarden or LastPass or 1Password really has a critical role to play. And just like they manage passwords today, they'll manage passkeys tomorrow. So, and they're all working on this, right? In fact, Dashlane and 1Password have talked about their beta implementations. I think Bitwarden has as well. And they're all taking part in the alliance, and they've been amazing contributors. So I think it shows that with every innovation, there's opportunity. I do think those companies have an important role to play.
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't see it then. I'm starting to see it now, so I was wrong. But hey, that's the great thing about opinions. They can change as new information comes along, right?
Harder to have an opinion and be wrong than not to have an opinion, in my book. And there's nothing wrong with having an opinion.
Okay, let's wrap up here with a lighter note. I crafted this one almost specifically for you. And this is more, I was watching a movie earlier this week as I was kind of working and had something off the side TV. It's not going to give you a scenario. So I took into account the golf course at Carlsbad, where we'll be, the resort, and the fact that we've had lots of music conversations, things like that. And here's my spin on it. I'm going to give you a scenario. You can ask as many questions as you like, and then we'll get to the answers. You are playing golf against an actor or a musician. If you win, you take their place in a movie or song of your choice. Who do you pick, and what movie or song are you going to be in now? So there's a couple of nuances here, right? You have to beat them. So you have to pick somebody that you think you could beat at golf.
Oh, okay. There's quite a skill also. Okay.
Right. Or you can gamble and say, oh, I don't know if I can beat him. I sure would want, that, try to go after that role or that song or whatever it may be. Any questions?
So if I'm the singer, so every time this band performs, am I like transported there as lead singer to be on stage singing this song?
Yes. So this transcends space and time as we know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say if it is a song, anytime that song is played, viewed, performed, etc., you're the person in whatever song or role of that song, right? Maybe you're the singer, maybe you're the guitarist or drummer or whatever it may be, or some other instrument. But it's just that one song, not the band and not the catalog, one song. Or, and firstly, one movie or something like that.
Could I take on the Wilson sisters and then never sing Barracuda ever again?
You could, and just sit there and just stare blankly into the camera, or
Barracuda. Sorry, it was not fair. I'm a pretty good golfer, so I like my chances against a lot of people. I think I'd go movie. There's some pretty cool roles out there that would be fun to be that actor or actress. Action movies are cool, in my mind, I can carry these stunts off, even though I'm getting old and decrepit and probably couldn't. I'm going to go old school. I was thinking like classic Sean Connery as James Bond, and that's, who doesn't want to be that guy? I'm going to go with Clint Eastwood as Dirty Harry.
Oh, that's a good one.
Now, the problem there, Clint in his prime was a pretty good golfer, so I probably couldn't beat him. Plus, he'd probably intimidate the hell out of me. But assuming I could somehow beat him, I would love to be Dirty Harry. That'd be a pretty good role to have.
That sounds great.
I'm into that. Yes.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. Jim, what's yours?
Yeah, I don't think mine is as good as that, but I wasn't thinking about the beat him part, so I'm not sure I can beat the person I'm going to mention, but I do have a qualification, so I'm only picking this person if we can yuck it up while we're doing the 18 holes. So if we can't yuck it up, I mean, I don't want to be there with this person, but I picked Ron Livingston. Because first I had to go with a movie, right? Because the song I did kind of think through, like, okay, I don't want to be on stage every night. I want to be in one movie that I can say, yeah, I was in Office Space. Remember that?
And so for people who aren't familiar, who is Ron Livingston?
That's Peter in Office Space, and he's also in Band of Brothers, which is like another fave of mine. But I'd pick his role in Office Space because, like, I feel like I know every line of that movie, and yucking it up on the golf course would be like, I would be his boss, like, Peter, what's happening?
I love it.
And he's like, just go away. So we'd yuck it up.
Did you see the new cover sheet? Because we've got a new cover sheet now for.
Yeah, have you felt like that in your job at one point or another, where somebody's like, "I'll get you another copy of that memo."
It's like the timesheet reminders. Peel back the curtain, right? For consulting, anybody who's in consulting probably has to fill out timesheets every, theoretically every day or every week, every pay period, whatever it may be. But yeah, we get so many reminders on the last day of the pay period.
Well, the worst is like, remember, timesheets are due at 5:00, and then you get the email at 3:00. Hey, you still haven't submitted your timesheet. Yeah, 5:00's in 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Generative AI should answer that question for you at some point.
AI is going to solve all of our problems. Okay, so the genesis for this question, I was watching a movie earlier this week, Iron Man. Ooh. And is Robert Downey's role in the first Iron Man blew me away. And I just love the character. It's totally my speed. I'd love to be the rich playboy with all the fancy technology and toys. Everybody knows I'm kind of a tech dork to begin with. But yeah, I'm almost certain I could not beat anybody in golf, but I would enjoy the journey. And if on some chance I'm able to pull it off, I would love to have the role of Iron Man in the same, like, I thought he was just a perfect fit, and it was just like he pulled it off so well. So not as deep. I like the Clint Eastwood one. That's really good too. I like the Office Space one. I mean, these are good choices. It's hard to pick just one though, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely bringing this conversation or this question to all my friends and family for over drinks. This will be a fun conversation. Great question.
Good. So then mission accomplished. Who cares about all that identity crap that we talked about? This is why people tune in to the Identity of the Center podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to get things wrapped up. I do want to give a shout out to a recent 5-star review on Apple Podcasts that somebody left for us. Informative, entertaining, and educational. Jeff and Jim have an awesome rapport on the podcast. Additionally, they bring a wealth of knowledge for people looking to educate themselves on the nuances of identity security. Keep up the awesome work, gents. JK. Hopefully that doesn't mean just kidding, but it's somebody named JK Chi-Town22. I don't know who that is, but they just left it like a couple weeks ago. Awesome. But that was very cool. So we fooled another one, Jim, into thinking that we have an awesome rapport. We get off and it's like, cats and dogs. No, we get along. We've been working together for like almost a decade at this point.
Yeah, I definitely could have gotten away from you if I wanted to. I had my opportunities.
Yes, you've had it.
So did you.
I keep pulling you along and keeping you close. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. I've got a bunch of links in our show notes. Connect with Andrew on LinkedIn. Learn more about the FIDO Alliance at fidoalliance.org. I've got the link for the FIDO UX guidelines. They're available for both PDF and HTML, which is very cool. Very flexible way to look over things and kind of get an idea of what they have there. I've got a link to the Cybersecurity Midwest Summit. That's in Cincinnati, September 14th. Identity Week America, code IDAC30, 30% off of your conference pass. We'll have a link to that. Authenticate conference, which is why we're here today. IDAC 15 podcast, 15% off. Thank you very much to Andrew and the team for helping provide that. We hope to see a lot of friendly faces, a lot of new faces at the Authenticate conference. It really is a great one. I've been to the last, I think, 3 or 4 now at this point, and I'm looking forward to the location. San Diego area is awesome, and looking forward to either golfing or we're close enough to the beach. I think, Andrew, right? We can go there. It's like right there as well. I mean, it's pretty close. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We're on the web, idacpodcast.com, IDAC Podcast on Twitter or X or whatever the heck it's going to be called by the time you listen to this. We're on Mastodon at IDAC Podcast at infosec.exchange. Jim and I are on LinkedIn. We're always happy to connect with people, take questions, or get show ideas, things like that. And don't forget to subscribe and be cool, just like JK Chi-Town22, so that you know when new episodes drop, and hit that like, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever it is, right? That helps us put out more content and helps us get great gigs, like working with Andrew and FIDO Alliance and others to bring the goodness of identity to all. Okay, that was a terrible soapbox ending. I'm going to wrap it up right there. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk with everyone in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com and find us on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. See you next time on Identity at the Center.